My name is Thilda Vance and I am 65 years old. My husband laughed. You'll never survive a day without my income. Then I had Tio hand him the summons for the $500,000 he embezzled from my account. The steak on my plate was cold, but the air in our dining room was colder. Ethan sat across from me, his silk tie loosened, looking every bit the successful man I had helped him become over 30 years. I had just asked him why our joint investment account looked so thin. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back and let out a laugh that rattled my soul. It wasn't a joke, it was a sneer. Thilda, you're 65 years old. You've spent your life picking out curtains and making pot roast, he said, his eyes mocking me. You'll never survive a day without my income. Don't worry your gray head about the numbers. Just be grateful I'm still here to provide for you. The room felt like it was spinning. This was the man I loved, telling me I was nothing. My hand shook under the table, gripping a heavy envelope. We'll see about that, Ethan. I whispered through my tears. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark guest room with my laptop glowing like a ghost. I logged into our private savings account, the one my father had left me as an inheritance. My heart stopped. The balance, which should have been over $500,000, showed exactly $48.73. I scrolled through the history with blurry eyes. A massive wire transfer had occurred just 3 days ago. The destination was an account I didn't recognize, but the name on the transaction was clear, Ethan Vance. He hadn't just insulted my intelligence, he had robbed my future. On the nightstand, I found a small, handwritten note he must have left while I was in the shower. It simply said, "Don't contact me. It's over. I've taken what I'm owed for carrying you all these years." He had left me with nothing but the clothes in my closet and a broken heart. The next few days were a blur of cold panic. The mortgage was due, the electricity bill arrived, and I had no way to pay them. I tried calling Ethan dozens of times, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Then, the blocking started. I was shut out of his life like a piece of trash. On Thursday, his young assistant, a girl barely 25 named Ava, accidentally posted a series of photos on her public social media page. There they were, in Maui. Ethan was wearing a linen shirt I had bought him, his arm draped around her tan, youthful waist. They were drinking champagne that cost more than my remaining bank balance. He looked younger, happier, and completely unbothered by the woman he had left starving in a big, empty house. I scrolled through the pictures until my vision went dark. I felt the floor rush up to meet me as I fainted. I woke up in a sterile hospital room with the steady beep of a heart monitor. The doctor told me it was a stress-induced breakdown. My body was literally shutting down from the shock of the betrayal. As I lay there feeling hollow, an older nurse named Martha came in to check my vitals. She saw the tears leaking from the corners of my eyes and the laptop still clutched in my hand. She leaned down, her voice a soft but firm whisper. "I've seen women like you come through these doors before, honey," she said. "You have two choices. You can let this grief bury you, or you can use it as fuel. You need to fight back while you still have breath in your lungs." Her words felt like a spark in a frozen forest. I opened my laptop and, with trembling fingers, typed, "Divorce attorney specializing in financial fraud." 2 days later, I walked into the office of Carla Reed. She was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite. She didn't offer me tissues, she offered me a seat and a legal pad. I told her everything, the 30 years of marriage, the inheritance, and the $500,000 that vanished overnight. Carla listened in total silence, her pen moving rapidly across the paper. When I finished, she looked up and a slow, predatory smirk spread across her face. It was the first time I felt a flicker of hope. "If he took your money, Thilda, we aren't just going to get it back," she said, leaning over her desk. "We are going to take his entire world apart, brick by brick. But before we strike, we need the kind of proof that he can't lie his way out of." Carla didn't waste any time. She hired a private investigator who specialized in digital shadows. Within 48 hours, we were looking at a map of Ethan's greed. It wasn't just my inheritance, he had been siphoning money for years. He had 3 offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands and a luxury car collection hidden in a rented warehouse 2 towns over. Every single purchase was tracked back to my father's hard-earned money. My heart felt like a heavy stone as I saw the names on the accounts. One specific account was titled Project Freedom. It was the largest one, holding nearly $300,000 of the stolen funds. "He wasn't just leaving you, Thilda," Carla said, pointing at the screen. "He was planning this exit for a long time. This wasn't a mistake. It was a cold, calculated heist. I realized then that the man I slept beside was a total stranger. I needed to see the face of his Project Freedom for myself. Carla's investigator gave me the address of a high-end French restaurant where Ethan and Ava dined every Friday. I sat in my old car across the street, wearing a headscarf and sunglasses. When they walked out, the sight made me nauseous. Ava was wearing a diamond necklace that looked suspiciously like the one Ethan told me he had lost during our move 5 years ago. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear, his hand sliding firmly onto her thigh as they waited for the valet. The way he touched her wasn't just affectionate, it was possessive. He looked at her like she was the prize he had bought with my life savings. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He thought I was home crying. He had no idea I was watching him drown. A week later, I found out Ethan was attending a massive charity gala for the city's business elite. He wanted to maintain his image as a successful philanthropist. I spent the last of my hidden cash on a stunning navy blue gown and a professional hairstylist. When I walked into that ballroom, the air seemed to leave the room. Ethan was on stage, toasted by the mayor, holding Ava's hand. To freedom, to new beginnings, and to unparalleled success, he announced, raising his glass. The crowd cheered, but I stood right in the center of the floor and began to clap. Slowly, methodically. The sound of my lone applause cut through the chatter like a knife. Ethan's face turned from a triumphant red to a ghostly, pale white the moment he realized it was me. He nearly dropped his crystal flute. I followed him into the quiet hallway behind the kitchen. He was sweating, his eyes darting around to see if anyone had noticed us. "What are you doing here, Thilda? You're making a scene," he hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. He tried to puff out his chest, leaning close to intimidate me. "You think you've won something by showing up? Sweetheart, look at yourself. You're a ghost. You were just an investment that finally ran dry, and I've moved on to better markets." He actually had the nerve to smirk, thinking he still held all the power because he had the checkbook. I didn't scream. I didn't slap him. I just smiled back, a cold, empty expression that seemed to rattle him more than tears ever could. "You think money is the only thing that matters, Ethan?" I recorded every word of that. The moment I got into my car, I sent the audio file to Carla. It was crystal clear, his admission that he viewed our marriage as a financial investment and his mocking tone. Carla messaged back within seconds. "Perfect. This shows intent and malice. Now let's destroy him legally." I felt a surge of adrenaline, but it was short-lived. The next morning, I walked out to my driveway to go to the grocery store. As soon as I pressed the unlock button on my key fob, a deafening boom rocked the neighborhood. My car erupted in a ball of orange flame and black smoke. The force of the blast threw me backward onto the grass. It was a warning. Ethan wasn't just a thief. He was becoming dangerous. He wanted me to know that if I didn't stop, the next explosion wouldn't just be the car. The smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled my lungs as I lay on the damp grass. My ears were ringing, and the heat from the wreckage scorched my skin. Neighbors rushed out, their faces blurred by my watering eyes. I knew immediately this wasn't an accident. The fire department arrived, and the police found traces of tampered wires and a primitive incendiary device. However, there were no fingerprints, no physical evidence linking it to Ethan. He was smart. Carla arrived at the scene, her face tight with worry but her eyes burning with a new intensity. "He's desperate, Thilda," she whispered over the sirens. "A man only tries to blow up the evidence when he knows he's about to lose everything. This means we are getting very close to the jugular." That night, a text appeared on my burner phone. "Still think you can fight me? Some fires can't be put out." I spent the next 3 days jumping at every shadow in my house. I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow, my eyes fixed on the bedroom door. Just when I thought I couldn't take the silence anymore, I received an anonymous message on an encrypted app. "I used to work for Ethan's firm. I know where the bodies are buried. He isn't just stealing from you, he's laundering money for people you don't want to meet." My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this a trap set by Ethan, or a genuine lifeline? The message ended with a set of coordinates and a strict instruction: "Meet me at the old shipyard at midnight. Come alone or don't come at all." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The old Thilda would have been too scared to move. The new Thilda grabbed her coat and her car keys. The shipyard was a skeleton of rusted metal and howling wind. I pulled my jacket tight, every instinct screaming at me to turn around. A figure emerged from the darkness near a stack of shipping containers. It was Marcus, Ethan's former head accountant who had retired suddenly last year. He looked thin and haunted, his eyes constantly scanning the perimeter. "He's going to kill me if he finds out I talked," Marcus stammered, his hands shaking as he pulled a small black flash drive from his pocket. "This contains every stolen dollar, every offshore route, and the real ledgers." He kept 2 sets of books, Thilda. One for the world, and one for his greed. Just as I reached out to take the drive, a pair of headlights cut through the fog. Ethan's black SUV roared into the lot, locking eyes with us. "Run!" Marcus screamed. He threw a heavy tool crate toward the oncoming vehicle to cause a distraction. I didn't look back. I bolted toward the maze of containers, the rain slicking the pavement beneath my boots. I could hear the heavy thud of Ethan's footsteps behind me, his breath ragged with fury. "Give it to me, Thilda. You don't know what you're holding," he roared into the night. I ducked behind a rusted hull, my heart feeling like it was going to burst out of my chest. I managed to slip through a gap in the perimeter fence just as his hand brushed my coat. I scrambled into a waiting taxi I had called in advance. Once I was safe, I looked at the flash drive. I needed a hiding spot he would never suspect. I tucked it inside the backing of our framed wedding photo. The next morning, I did the unthinkable. I called Ethan and told him I wanted to talk. I met him at his office, wearing the silk dress and the perfume he used to love. I played the part of the broken, defeated wife perfectly. I let my lip tremble as I sat across from him. "I can't live like this, Ethan. The fire, the chasing. I just want my life back," I sobbed into a lace handkerchief. He softened, his ego feasting on my apparent surrender. He walked around the desk and pulled me into a tight embrace. He kissed me, a long, intense kiss that tasted like iron and lies. I felt his hand on my back, tracing the spine of the woman he thought he had finally broken. I whispered into his ear, "How does betrayal taste, Ethan?" He thought it was a romantic confession. While his eyes were closed and he was lost in the feeling of his own victory, my hand moved like a shadow. I had a small device Carla gave me, a high-speed cloner. I pressed it against his phone, which sat face up on the mahogany desk. The blue light flickered once, twice, and then stayed solid. The transfer was complete. I pulled away from the kiss, looking at him with feigned longing. "I need time to think about our future," I whispered, stepping back. He adjusted his tie, looking smug and powerful again. "Take all the time you need, Thilda. Just remember who holds the keys to your life." As soon as I reached the elevator, I opened my own screen. His entire digital life was now mine. Every bank app, every private message, and every secret was laid bare. A message popped up, transfer complete. $200,000 moved to Cayman Islands. I spent the afternoon digging through the clone files. I discovered that Ethan wasn't acting alone. He had a business partner named Greg, a man known for his strict ethics and old-school values. The record showed that Greg had no idea about Ethan's embezzlement. Ethan had been forging Greg's signature on the fraudulent documents to cover his tracks. If Greg found out, he wouldn't just be angry. He would be the final nail in Ethan's coffin. I arranged a secret meeting with Greg at a quiet park outside the city. When I showed him the forged signatures and the diverted funds on my tablet, his face turned a deep, dangerous shade of purple. He crushed his paper coffee cup in his hand. "He used my name to steal from his own wife?" Greg asked, his voice shaking. "If you bring me the original drive, I'll bury him myself." The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was a message from Ava, the mistress. "I need to talk to you. Please. I'm at the clinic. He's leaving me too." Against my better judgment, I went to meet her. She looked terrible, her designer clothes replaced by a simple hoodie, her eyes red from crying. She told me she was pregnant and that as soon as Ethan found out, he cut her off completely. He told her she was damaged goods and that he didn't want a child ruining his new life. She looked at me with genuine fear, realizing she had been used just as I had. "He made me sign papers for the laundering," she sobbed. "I didn't know what they were. Thilda, he's a monster." I watched her closely, wondering if this was another play. I invited her over to talk in a place where I had cameras. Ava sat on my sofa, clutching a mug of tea with trembling hands. She started talking, and she didn't stop. She confessed everything. How Ethan had coached her to flirt with the bank managers, how he used her personal accounts to move the money, and how he laughed about my senility behind my back. I sat there, listening to the recorded confession play out in real time on my laptop. Every word was a golden ticket to his destruction. "He's planning to flee the country next week," she whispered. "He has a jet already booked." Just as she said those words, the front door was kicked open with a violent crash. Ethan stood there, his face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. He had tracked her phone. He saw us together and knew the game was up. "You stupid girl!" Ethan screamed, lunging toward Ava. I stepped between them, my heart racing but my stance firm. I felt like a mother bear protecting a cub, even if the cub had tried to steal my life. "Stay away from her, Ethan," I said, my voice steady and cold. Ava stood up and did something I didn't expect. She stepped forward and slapped him across the face with all her might. "You ruined us both," she yelled. Ethan looked stunned, his hand touching his cheek as he looked from her to me. He saw the laptop on the table, the recording light still glowing bright red. He realized that every word of his threats was being captured. "You think you've ruined me," he hissed, looking at me. I looked him in the eye and felt no fear. "Not yet. But I will." The aftermath of the confrontation felt like the air before a lightning strike. True to his word, Greg didn't wait for the courts. Using the evidence I provided, he leaked the details of Ethan's fake business deals to the firm's board of directors. By the time the sun set, Ethan's professional reputation was in freefall. The company's stock plummeted as news of internal irregularities hit the wires. I sat in my darkened living room, watching a local news ticker crawl across the screen with his name on it. He was being purged from the very empire he had built on my back. My phone buzzed with an alert from a legal contact Carla had inside the government. The wheels of the state were finally turning. An official IRS audit had been initiated against Ethan Vance personally. The hunter was now being hunted by the most relentless force on Earth. Ethan didn't go down without a fight. Within 48 hours, he filed a massive defamation lawsuit against me, claiming I was a scorned woman suffering from mental decline. He hired a high-priced shark of a lawyer to intimidate me. Carla just laughed when she saw the papers. "This is exactly what we wanted, Thilda. By suing you, he's opened the door for us to subpoena every single one of his personal records," she said, her eyes gleaming. "He thinks he's attacking, but he's just handed us the keys to the vault." That afternoon, while I was leaving Carla's office, Ethan's lawyer served me with papers in the parking lot. I didn't flinch. I reached into my bag and pulled out a blue envelope of my own. "Give this to your client," I told him. "It's a formal notice of our countersuit." The preliminary courtroom showdown arrived on a humid Tuesday morning. Ethan sat across the aisle, sneering at me, whispering to his lawyer while adjusted his expensive gold watch. He still thought he could charm the room. He looked at me like I was a fly he was about to swat. But the atmosphere shifted the moment the judge took her seat. Carla stood up and presented the initial findings of the audit, showing the massive discrepancies between his lifestyle and his reported income. The judge's face remained like stone as she reviewed the documents. Then came the order that made Ethan's smirk vanish, a full, unconditional financial disclosure of all assets, domestic and foreign. He turned a sickly shade of gray. Carla leaned over and whispered, "Now we've got him exactly where we want him, Thilda. He has nowhere left to hide the bodies." The audit began to pull back the curtain on a life of total fraud. It exposed his secret offshore transfers to the Cayman Islands and dozens of false tax reports. It was a mountain of evidence, but Carla pulled me aside in the hallway. "Thilda, this is enough to ruin him financially and maybe get him a fine, but it's still not enough to ensure he goes to prison for a long time. We need the smoking gun," she warned. I felt a chill. I couldn't let him walk away with a slap on the wrist after he tried to kill me. I went home and stood in front of the wedding photo I had cherished for decades. My hands shook as I peeled back the paper backing. There it was, the flash drive Marcus had given me. The absolute truth was held in a piece of plastic. I drove to Carla's house in the middle of the night and handed her the flash drive. We sat in her kitchen, the glow of the monitor reflecting in her glasses as she went through the files. It was all there, the embezzlement data, the fraud, the recorded threats, and the details of the Project Freedom laundering scheme. There was even a folder containing Ava's detailed confession and the names of the people Ethan was laundering for. Carla sat back, her breath hitching in her throat. "This isn't just a divorce case anymore, Thilda. This is a federal criminal racketeering case," she whispered. She looked at me with a newfound respect, her hand resting on the drive. "He's going to prison for a very, very long time. And the best part? He doesn't even know we have this yet. The trap is set." Ethan returned to our marital home that evening, still acting as if he owned the world. He had poured himself a glass of my father's vintage scotch and was sitting in the library, his feet up on the ottoman. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "You're late, Thilda," he remarked, his voice dripping with unearned confidence. I hope you've been preparing your apology. I didn't say a word. I simply walked over to the desk and dropped a heavy legal envelope right on top of his feet. He frowned, picking it up with a sigh of annoyance. The moment he read the bold lettering at the top, his hand began to shake. Summons, financial fraud, $500,000 restitution claim. His eyes darted to the bottom of the page where my signature gleamed, bold and final. He looked up at me, his face pale, but I was already walking out. By the next morning, the dam had finally burst. I didn't have to say a word because the news outlets were doing the talking for me. Headlines screamed across every local station, local businessman accused of massive fraud and stealing from wife. The prestige he had spent his life polishing vanished in a single news cycle. His office was swarmed by reporters, and his remaining clients fled like rats from a sinking ship. His reputation, the only thing he truly loved more than money, lay in ruins on the sidewalk. To make matters worse for him, Ava had decided to protect herself. She sold several intimate photos and incriminating text messages to the biggest tabloids in the state. The world didn't just see a thief, they saw a pathetic, cruel man who had betrayed everyone who ever cared for him. Ethan's spiral was fast and ugly. Without his accounts, which were now frozen by the court, he couldn't afford his high-priced lawyer or his luxury lifestyle. I heard through the grapevine that he was drinking heavily, staying in a cheap motel because Greg had locked him out of the firm. One rainy evening, he called me, begging me to meet him at a park. I went, but I stayed inside my car with the doors locked. He looked 10 years older, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained. He tapped on my window, his eyes bloodshot. Please, Thilda, just drop the restitution. I'll give you whatever you want, he whined. I rolled the window down just an inch. You told me I couldn't survive a day without your income, Ethan, I said coldly. Turns out, I can live much better with your total ruin. The trial was a masterclass in justice. I sat in the front row, wearing my favorite pearls, watching as the evidence was laid out like a roadmap of betrayal. The prosecution played the audio recordings I had made, showing the jury his true, venomous character. They showed the wire transfers, the forged signatures, and the video of him admitting he saw me as a dry investment. Ethan sat at the defense table, his head bowed, looking smaller with every passing hour. He turned a ghostly shade of white as the judge read the long list of criminal charges. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't cry. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, I am not your wife anymore, Ethan. I am your creditor, and I've come to collect everything you stole. The jury didn't even need 2 hours to deliberate. The verdict came back, guilty on all counts. The judge was a woman who clearly had no patience for men like Ethan. She ordered immediate restitution of the full $500,000, plus an additional $200,000 in damages for the emotional toll and the destruction of my property. Ethan actually collapsed into his chair when the sentence was read. He was led away in handcuffs, his golden life finally ending in a jail cell. As the guards escorted him out, Carla leaned over and whispered the final blow in my ear. That's not even the best part, Thilda. Because of the fraud, his company is being liquidated. He's going to lose every brick of that office building, and he'll owe the government millions. The court-ordered liquidation happened faster than I expected. Ethan's vanity projects, his fleet of cars, and even his beloved office furniture were put on the auction block to pay back his debts. I decided to attend the final auction of our former estate, the house where he had laughed at my worth. I didn't hide in the back. I wore a vibrant red coat and sat in the front row, looking every bit the woman who had survived. When our house came up for bid, the room went quiet. Because of the scandal, the price had dropped to half its original value. I raised my paddle with a steady hand and didn't lower it until the gavel fell. The auctioneer looked at me with a nod of recognition. Sold to the lady in red, he announced. I walked to the desk and wrote a check. Paid in full, I whispered. Returning to the house was strange, but I didn't let the ghosts of the past stay long. I hired a crew to strip the wallpaper Ethan had chosen and tear out the mahogany office where he had plotted his thefts. I didn't want a mansion for myself, I wanted a monument to resilience. Within months, I renovated the entire space, turning it into a beautiful, sun-drenched women's business co-op. I named it The Inheritance. It became a place where women could find legal help, financial advice, and a safe space to grow their own dreams without being underestimated. On opening day, a local TV reporter asked me what had inspired such a massive undertaking after such a public betrayal. I looked directly into the camera lens. Being underestimated is a powerful gift, I said. It gives you the silence you need to build a masterpiece. A few weeks after the grand opening, a letter arrived at my new office. It was postmarked from the state penitentiary. I recognized Ethan's cramped, messy handwriting immediately. I sat at my desk, the one that used to be his, and opened it with a letter opener shaped like a sword. The pages were filled with desperate pleas and hollow apologies. "I miss our life together, Thilda," he wrote. I was confused. I didn't mean for things to go this far. "I still love you." I didn't cry, and I didn't feel a shred of pity. I simply laughed at the sheer gall of a man who only felt love when he was behind bars and broke. I took a photo of myself standing in my new garden with Greg, both of us smiling and holding a toast to our new partnership. I mailed it back without a single word. Greg proved to be the partner Ethan never could be. Together, we launched a new investment venture that focused on ethical wealth management for seniors. We built the very company Ethan had once dreamed of, but we did it with honesty and transparency. Because of my story, people flocked to us. They trusted me because they knew I had been in the trenches and fought my way out. My personal account balance soon soared past $2 million, far exceeding what Ethan had ever stolen. I looked at the numbers on my screen one morning while drinking coffee on my new patio. It was a staggering amount of security. Not bad for a 65-year-old woman who couldn't survive a day without his income, I mused. I felt lighter than I had in 30 years. One rainy afternoon, a woman walked into the co-op looking lost. It was Ava. She looked sober, her face clear of the heavy makeup she used to wear to please Ethan. She was visibly pregnant now, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. She told me she had finished her community service and was trying to start over, but no one would hire her because of her connection to the scandal. She looked at me with a mixture of shame and hope, waiting for me to kick her out. Instead, I remembered the nurse in the hospital who told me to fight. I reached out and took her hand, pulling her toward a chair. "The past is a heavy load to carry alone, Ava," I said gently. "Let's build something better for you and that baby. Everyone deserves a second chance at a first-rate life." The work with Ava turned into something much larger than a single act of kindness. We opened a specialized wing in the co-op called the Silver Shield Foundation. It was dedicated entirely to helping older women who had been defrauded by their partners or family members. We provided them with the same ruthless legal team and forensic accountants that had helped me find my footing. The story of two women from opposite ends of a betrayal joining forces went viral. I was no longer just a scorned wife in the public eye, I was a symbol of a new kind of power. National news programs began calling for interviews, and our foundation's model started being copied in other states. I realized that my pain had been a seed for a garden that was now feeding thousands of people who had lost hope. A year after the trial, I found myself standing backstage at a massive women's empowerment gala. I had been asked to give the keynote speech. The room was filled with hundreds of women, their faces glowing in the dim light of the auditorium. When the announcer said my name, the roar of the crowd was deafening. I walked to the podium, the lights blazing so brightly I could barely see the front row. I didn't use a script. I just told them the truth. Sometimes, being broken is the only way you learn what you are actually made of, I told them, my voice echoing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. The world will tell you that you are finished, especially as you age. But a woman's worth is not an investment for a man to trade. It is her own sovereign territory. While my life was reaching new heights, Ethan's world continued to shrink. His company eventually filed for a messy Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Because of the nature of his crimes, his name became a permanent cautionary tale taught in business schools and law seminars. He was the man who had it all and threw it away for a greed he couldn't even manage. I heard from Marcus that Ethan spent his days in the prison library, staring at the walls. He had lost his friends, his fortune, and his dignity. I decided to do one last thing to close the circle. I drove to the state prison on a cold Tuesday morning. I didn't go out of hate, and I didn't go to gloat. I went because I needed to see him one last time to know for sure that he no longer held any power over my heart. He sat behind the glass, his orange jumpsuit hanging off his thin frame. He looked like a hollow shell of the man who had laughed at me over steak and wine. When he picked up the phone, his voice was a pathetic whisper. "Was it worth it, Thilda? Destroying everything we built for a few $100,000, he asked, his eyes searching mine for a flicker of the old devotion. I leaned close to the glass, my expression calm and peaceful. "It was worth every cent, Ethan. But I didn't destroy what we built. You burned that down yourself the moment you thought I was a possession instead of a person." He looked down at his shackled hands, finally realizing that he would never be able to charm his way out of this silence. "You are always the stronger one," he whispered. I simply hung up and walked away. Today, I am sitting on a balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The wind is in my hair, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm waiting for someone else's permission to breathe. I look at my hands, aged and spotted, but steady enough to hold my own future. I didn't destroy Ethan for the sake of revenge. I did it to remember that I was never his to take. He taught me how to survive in a storm, but I taught him that every betrayal has a consequence that eventually comes home to roost. My bank account is full, my heart is at peace, and my legacy is finally my own. As the sun sets over the water, I realize that the best part of being underestimated is the moment you finally prove everyone wrong. Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe for more. Also turn on your notification bell so you be the first to get our next shocking revenge story.